Time for the Legion levelling main story stuff. No matter how bloody long it takes to write this script, I'm determined to get it all done in one video. So let's do it. Both the Broken Shore and Suramar had been completely overrun by the Legion. In fact, there was only really one zone that remained somewhat free of overall demonic control. Azsuna, the Haunted Island. In ancient times, Azsuna had been a bit of a paradise for the Highborn. However, during the War of the Ancients, it became the opposite of that. A battleground between Queen Ashara and the region's ruler, Prince Ferondis. Understandably, the prince didn't agree with the queen that demons were people that you should be friends with. Ferondis attempted to use one of the Pillars of Creation, the Tidestone of Golganeth, to destroy the Well of Eternity. But Ashara discovered that plan, head to the city of Narthalos, and shattered the Tidestone, which caused a massive magical explosion, consuming the zone and all of the people in it. Initially, everybody was utterly annihilated, but in the next moment, they all returned, cursed to walk the earth forever, never knowing the release of death, because they were all now weird magical ghosties. Back to the present, champions of Azeroth head into Azsuna in search of their first pillar of creation, discovering the cursed ghosty residents locked in battle with not only the Legion, but also the Naga. Now, I am going to do books 2 and 3 of the War of the Ancients trilogy at some point in the future, but for the sake of including all of the things in this video, there's going to be a whole bunch of spoilers for those books that are 20 years old. At the end of the War of the Ancients, Malfurion Stormrage used the Dragon Soul to alter the Well of Eternity, closing the Legion's portal. However, that resulted in the well imploding, killing millions and causing the Great Sundering. Queen Ashara shielded herself and her closest followers from that initial blast, but there wasn't much she could do to avoid the subsequent tsunami and sinking of her great city into the sea. However, just before she drowned, a weird whispering fish appeared. It was the voice of N'Zoth, the old god. It offered her salvation, which she accepted, but, surprise surprise, she and her people were then corrupted, transforming into a bunch of serpent-like creatures called Naga. And in return for that wonderful gift, the old god tasked Ashara with the mission of finding a way to free him from his prison beneath the sea. But anyway, forces of the Horde and Alliance clashed with the Naga and established a foothold in Azsuna, and were then encouraged by the cursed ghosty residents to seek out Prince Ferondis. They didn't seem like they were his biggest fans, many of them blaming him for their current state, but they couldn't deny that the prince still sought to protect his people, whether they wanted his help or not. Soon enough, champions found the prince, and grateful for their assistance of his people, he led them to the ruins of Narthalos, where he and his subjects guarded the pieces of the Tidestone. However, Queen Ashara believed the Tidestone's power was crucial in her mission to free N'Zoth. So just as the champions entered the ruins and discovered the fragments of the thing, Naga agents burst in, captured the hero, and took the Pillar of Creation for themselves. Lucky for us though, Ferondis was still outside. He was somewhat savvy to Ashara's plans, so he'd hidden himself and then pursued the Naga back to their base. Amid this rescue, he encountered a vision of Ashara, who attempted to bargain with him, promising Ferondis that she would free him and his people from their curse as long as he kneeled before her. And the prince responded with no. Ferondis then freed the heroes of Azeroth, but the task of retrieving the Tidestone still remained, and in order to do that, they were going to need to do the Eye of Ashara dungeon. Ashara's followers had cheesed it to an island stronghold and created an absolute monstrosity whose sole purpose was to be a dungeon boss. So, the champions head there, took the wrath of Ashara's ass, retrieved the Tidestone, and all was right in the world. Back to ancient times again, the Tauren and Drogbar of High Mountain had suffered brutal oppression at the hands of Deathwing. After the Sundering, the Black Dragon had retreated to his lair in this zone and spent many years recovering, gathering his strength, with the Hammer of Khaz'goroth in his possession that entire time, until eventually the Tauren hero Holn High Mountain showed up, stole the hammer, and used it to banish the fallen dragon aspect to the elemental plane of Deepholm. With Deathwing gone, his lair was then raided, with Holn and his mates discovering a clutch of black dragon eggs. Using the hammer again, Holn was able to purify one of the eggs, and thus was born Ebonhorn, a black dragon free of void corruption, free of the thing that had driven his kind to madness. As thanks, Ebonhorn, who later took the draconic name Abyssian, decided to stick around, taking on a Tauren visage and becoming a spirit walker, watching over Holn High Mountain and his descendants for generations. Back to the present again. After witnessing the battle for Broken Shore, the leaders of High Mountain had gathered for a summit, trying to figure out what their next course of action should be. The High Chieftain of the Tauren, Ulan, opened the floor for debate, with a few people, including Ulan's daughter Mela, being in favour of joining the Horde and Alliance. The Drogbar Underking Dargrul, however, wanted to engage the Legion but didn't really see the need to involve outsiders. After all, they had the Hammer of Khaz'goroth in their possession. Ulan disagreed with Dargrul, pointing out that the Tauren had been entrusted with guarding the hammer, not wielding it. At which point, Spirit Walker Ebonhorn piped up, explaining that he had experienced a vision. The hammer would indeed protect the people of High Mountain from the demons, but it was destined to be wielded by outsiders. Dargrul then had a strop, refusing to stand idly by whilst waiting for upstarts to come along and save them, and apparently he has very low emotional intelligence because he then just straight up murdered Ulan and took the Pillar of Creation, buggering off with his followers. Fearing a conflict with both the Legion and the Drogbar, the vast bulk of the High Mountain tribes then also buggered off, back to their homes, leaving the grieving Mela alone. So out of sheer desperation, she dispatched a messenger to Dalaran, requesting aid, and the champions decided that was as good a place as any to head next. The heroes of Azeroth gradually trekked their way through this second zone, helping Mela reunite several tribes, including a subgroup of Drogbar who did not follow their Underking. And with those new allies, Mela underwent the necessary trials to become the new High Chieftain. And with all of that out of the way, she then led everyone into Dargrul's territory. And whilst Mela and her peeps engaged the Drogbar forces, Ebonhorn, heroes of the Horde and the leader of the rebel Drogbars, went ahead and entered the High Mountain dungeon, Neltharion's lair. Unfortunately, Dargrul now potentially possessed near boundless might, thanks to the fact he was wielding a Pillar of Creation, and he refused to be taken alive. However, what the Underking did not know was that the Hammer of Khaz'goroth kinda had a bit of a mind of its own, respecting only those possessing true strength. Dargrul did not possess true strength, so the hammer felt like he was a bit of a twat. The heroes went ahead and took his ass, ultimately proving themselves worthy of the hammer's respect and obtaining a second Pillar of Creation. After that, as thanks, Mela pledged her strength to the heroes of Azeroth. She and her allied forces would do anything they could to aid in the fight against the Legion. So, things were looking really good. However, unbeknownst to everyone, Gul'dan and the Legion were also making some strides of their own. Pretty soon, the Warlock was going to gain the Vrykul and a Pillar of Creation of his own, so that's not so good. Horde and Alliance leaders had heard the ancient legends about the Vrykul and a third Pillar of Creation, the Aegis of Agramar. Apparently, a set of trials had been set long ago, where worthy champions could enter the halls of Valor and claim the Aegis. However, War Chief Sylvanas had a different objective in Stormheim, something which was more out of self-interest because she's morally grey. In the many years since Sylvanas' encounter with the Jailer, she'd been through quite a bit. Intense fighting, assassination attempts, otherworldly threats. That one time the Garrosh called her a witch. As a result, she'd worked her way through quite a few Valkyr, each one going to the Shadowlands in her place. Fortunately for her, Helya, the first Valkyr, happened to be in Stormheim, and she was an ally to the Jailer. If anyone knew a solution to this problem, it would be her. But, one slight obstacle, Sylvanas had Gen Greymane relentlessly humping her leg. Despite their overall shared goal of stopping the Legion, Gen held a pretty strong and justifiable grudge against Sylvanas. She had invaded and razed his kingdom of Gilneas many years ago, and killed his son, though she had been aiming at Gen himself, but that doesn't exactly make it better. So, Gen ordered Alliance troops in Stormheim to follow her, and pretty much get in the way of whatever the hell she was planning. The two sides collided, and came to blows, but Sylvanas escaped, heading into Helheim, a realm on the precipice of the Shadowlands. There, she found Helya, who was more than happy to assist a fellow colleague. But also, Helya saw an opportunity herself. Through Sylvanas, she could get one over on Odin. So, she gifted the War Chief with a powerful artifact called the Soul Cage, something which could compel the soul of any being it was used against. Sylvanas could use it to dominate the spirits of Valkyr that remained loyal to Odin, bringing them into her service instead. So, with the Soul Cage in hand, Sylvanas made her way to a vault in Skoldashil with the intention of capturing Aegir, the leader of Odin's Valkyr. But, Gen Greymane, again. Whilst she was distracted, exerting the artifact's power over her target, Gen struck. in the skirmish, he stole the soul cage from her, and then smashed it on the ground. And then he buggered off, presumably feeling really pleased with himself because Sylvanas was furious. The mission had not been a complete waste of time for her though. One thing Sylvanas did learn during this little questline was that the jailer's reach was actually quite impressive. He could probably help her accomplish many things. Anywho, back to the Pillar of Creation stuff. In their search for the Aegis, champions discovered Agrimar's vault, where they were given 3 stupid trials in order to prove their worth. However, as they set about conquering these trials, they came into contact with Vrykul that had fallen under the Legion's sway. See, Gul'dan had already approached the God King Skovald, promising him and his people power beyond their wildest dreams in exchange for their allegiance. And since that's pretty much exactly what every villain in this franchise wants, Skovald accepted that offer. He and his people took on the mantle of Fellscorn, and then immediately set about obtaining the Aegis. So, they too were currently undergoing the stupid trials from Agrimar's vault. However, the champions of Azeroth still managed to succeed in besting every single trial despite that. They befriended the Thorognir, storm dragons, which lived atop the mountain peaks of Stormheim. They gained the approval of long-dead Vrykul leaders by besting them in combat, and they even escaped Helheim after falling into a trap and bargaining with Helya herself. Unfortunately, God King Skovald was a bit of a sore loser. He and his Fellscorn assaulted Odin's fortress, with the champions initially facing Skovald in battle at the Gates of Valor, but he cheesed it inside, at which point the heroes did the Halls of Valor dungeon. Pathetically, Skovald outright lied to Odin, claiming he had also beaten the trials and was totally worthy. But the Titan Keeper told him to shut up. The Horde and Alliance had won the prize fair and square. The God King lashed out yet again, but got his ass taken, and all was right in the world. 3 Pillars of Creation were now safely residing within Dalaran. Next up, the Tears of Elune, and also the Emerald Dream stuff. Again, back in ancient times, a very young Malfurion Stormrage learned Druidism under the tutelage of the wild god Cenarius in a place called Val'sharah. And through those teachings, Malfurion gained the ability to traverse the Emerald Dream, a vast dimension of pure, untainted nature, and a realm that was watched over by the green dragon aspect Ysera. Over time, other Night Elves followed Malfurion into the dream and became Druids as well, and eventually, Val'sharah was turned into somewhat of a paradise, an echo of the dream where the world tree Shaladrisil grew, and everything was lovely. However, that didn't last. Long story short, after being defeated by Malfurion at the beginning of the War of the Ancients, Lord Xavius was twisted by Sargeras and transformed into a satyr. He then faced Malfurion and lost again, with the young druid imprisoning the jerk in a tree. That tree was lost amid the Sundering at the end of the War of the Ancients, sinking to the bottom of the sea, and there it was touched by the same void corruption which had twisted Ashara and her peeps. Later, when original Gul'dan raised the Broken Isles from the ocean, he also raised Xavius' tree, and the Lord of the Satyr immediately got to work, manipulating an archdruid into using a sapling from his tree and planting the world tree Teldrassil. Now, druids and keepers did sense a dark influence threatening the dream over the following years, so Malfurion ventured in to investigate. He then defeated Xavius again, this time sealing him away in the Rift of Aln. But the damage was kinda done. The old gods now very much had hold of the dream. Anyway, Khadgar tasked the champions with meeting Malfurion in Val'sharah next. He would accompany them to Cenarius, who would in turn tell them where the Tears of Elune were. Unfortunately, upon arrival and finding the Lord of the Forest, they discovered that Cenarius had entered the dream and would not wake up. And if that wasn't bad enough, corruption appeared to be spreading through his body. The heroes ventured out into the forest in order to find and bring back Cenarius' archdruids, but in doing that, they uncovered that the corruption taking hold of the Forest Lord was actually slowly choking the entire zone, with its denizens under attack from satyrs. The heroes quickly dealt with that, bringing all the archdruids back to Cenarius' body, as well as Ysera, the green dragon aspect, and she then identified and divulged exactly what the balls was going on. The world tree, Shaladrisil, had fallen to the nightmare. Xavius needed to be stopped, or else Val'sharah, the Emerald Dream, and Cenarius would be lost. Ysera then urged the heroes to head to the local Temple of Elune, where the Pillar of Creation they were after was kept. Unfortunately, champions arrived there to find the place under attack. Shaladrisil's corrupted roots had extended to the temple's very doorstep, with demons and satyr bloody everywhere. Even Xavius himself showed up, grabbing the Tears of Elune and buggering off. The heroes returned to the Grove of Cenarius, red-faced and empty-handed, just in time to see the Lord of the Forest be completely overtaken by corruption. And at this point, Malfurion absolutely lost his shit, flying into a rage and heading off to defeat his ancient enemy once and for all. Ysera and the heroes gave chase, attempting to calm the bloke down, but by the time they caught up, they found Malfurion bound by the roots of Shaladrisil and being tortured by the Nightmare Lord. And things just then continued to get worse, because in an effort to help Malfurion, Ysera fell right into Xavius' trap. As she swooped down, the Satyr Lord launched the corrupted Tears of Elune at her, causing her to be instantly consumed by the nightmare. The image of Malfurion being tortured then completely disappeared. Xavius laughed at us, and then he just walked off, which probably hurt our pride the most, to be honest. However, Tyrande Whisperwind then arrived. She joined the champions in tracking Ysera and Xavius, purging corruption along the way. Unfortunately, this too was all part of Xavius' genius plan, apparently. Whilst we were distracted, trying to save a very needy-sounding Malfurion, Ysera was completing the Nightmare Lord's conquest of Val'sharah. Upon realising this, Tyrande and the champions raced back to the Temple of Elune, and there they were forced to fight the fallen dragon aspect, and kill her. There was no other choice. A sudden lunar eclipse then occurred. Ysera's service to Elune and her connection to the Emerald Dream had bound her soul to the cycle of life and death. So her soul was drawn into the Shadowlands, to Ardenweald, where it would slumber for a couple of expansions. But we didn't know that at the time. I don't actually 100% believe that the writers did either. Ysera's body and soul disappeared in a burst of starlight, with a bunch of flowers appearing in her place. And from those things, a purified tear of Elune popped out, which the champions immediately claimed. So now we had 4 pillars of creation. Only one remained, the Eye of Aman'Thul, which was unfortunately in Gul'dan's possession, and would require doing a raid that comes later, so that'll be in the next video. Although the heroes had what they came for, Val'sharah had been a pretty harrowing experience, and Malfurion was still missing. First, the champions made their way to Darkheart Thicket within the tangled roots of Shaladrisil, defeating the Shade of Xavius and rescuing Malfurion in the process. He then explained that they were going to need to climb Shaladrisil in order to find the real Xavius, where the Veil of the Dream was at its thinnest. Up there they would find the entrance to the Emerald Nightmare Raid, so they did that. Now, whereas the Emerald Dream is a realm of nature and beauty, the Nightmare was the opposite of that. Decay, and faces only a mother could love. Obviously, being a raid, champions faced a bunch of bosses and trash mobs, which Chronicle glosses over pretty quickly. Nithendra, Dragons of Nightmare, the wild god Ursok. No mention of Il'gynoth whatsoever in the book, which is a little bit suspicious. Eventually, champions found themselves up against Cenarius, though thankfully we didn't have to kill him, just get his health down low enough so Malfurion could purify the bloke's soul. And once he was subdued, Malfurion then urged the heroes to head on into the Rift of Aln and finish this. Unfortunately, he couldn't come with us, because he wasn't going to risk falling under the same influence as his mentor, or something. The rift itself was dark and endless, full of swarms of nasty twats, hell-bent on devouring us. However, champions managed to blindly stumble their way into the Nightmare Lord and took his ass. And with his death, the path that the powers of the Void had opened to the Emerald Dream was closed. And everything was fine now. Or was it? Probably not.